So today we're talking pickleball pet peeves. Welcome. By the way, I'm just going to tell you straight up, if you see this wonderful little cat and little cat tail in the background, I have been trying to get rid of her for probably about the last 10 minutes. I tried a little food, tried a little of everything, and she just doesn't seem to be going away. That's okay. It is what it is. Welcome. I'm just checking my tech, just making sure that I have everything going. How's your day going today? Speaking of going, it is seriously cold in Tahoe. So now she's going to just sit up on the shelf, but that's okay. That's Shirley, by the way. It's freezing here in Tahoe. You can usually tell what is going on by what I'm wearing, and it's cold, single digits today. I hope it's nice where you are. Let me know if it's nice where you are. Say hello. Put something in the chat. Tell me hi. Tell me if you played pickleball today. Tell me what the temperature is. Today we are talking about pickleball pet peeves, specifically number 1 through 5. If you missed a couple of, or last month, which was in January, I talked about number 6 through 10. You had a lot to say about the things that happen on the court. And I'm very grateful that you did, because it's a wonderful conversation test for us to have. We all love this game and definitely want to make it even better. So, hey, Terry, how you doing? Sarasota, I'm going to guess it was probably warm there today, right? Did you play pickleball? I haven't played in a while. I've been nursing a little bit of a back issue and spending a lot of time skiing. For those of you who don't know me, my channel is the Better Pickleball channel, but my real passion is helping people who are over 50 to age well, to train their bodies, to be the athletes that we want to be, and stay healthy and maintain this fantastic life. And pickleball is a part of that because it's such a darn fun game. But that's the big picture of what I do. In fact, if you follow Age Well with CJ, you'll know that I have just in the process of launching Fit After 50, which is a health and wellness program designed for people who are over 50, hence the name Fit After 50, to get healthy and lose weight and stay that way for the rest of their lives. I'm almost done with that launch. The program closes tomorrow night at 11:59. So if it's something that interests you, I'll put a link down in the show notes below. You can take a look, but you better do so quick. Terry did play pickleball. It was beautiful. I'm sure it was. Hello to you, Dave from Riverside. Yeah, so everybody's starting to filter in just a little bit now. Wonderful. Well, last month, or actually back in December, I sent an email out to you and I asked you what were some of the things I specifically said. What is it that you want people to start doing on the court, and what is it that you want people to stop doing on the court? And typically my response rate when I ask a question about upcoming videos, topics, things like that, it's generally around 1%, which I think is really great. This was about 10%, and you had a lot to say, and fear not, I read them because there's so much great information in there. There'll be videos to come, well beyond this. But in any event, we had 10 things that you talked about and yet talked about a lot. And today I want to hit number 1 through 5. So that's what we're going to get into today. Is we are going to get into the top 10 pickleball pet peeves. I am calling this a volume number 2 because it's actually 1 through 5. Any ideas what you think number 1 is going to be? If you do, whatever you think number 1 is going to be, put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what you think number 1 is going to be. But let's jump in. We are going to get to we're going to start David Letterman style, right? He used to do the top 10 contents. We're going to start with number 5. And so number 5 is excessive spin. And here's what you had to say about excessive spin. It wasn't that you minded getting it. It wasn't that you minded playing with people who would spin the ball a lot. What was troublesome for many of you was the fact that a lot of new players had not yet mastered the basics to the game. and they were trying to use spin as a tactic. In fact, there was many a comment that said, you can't keep the ball in. In essence, you can't keep the ball in, and you're trying to spin the ball. So the conventional wisdom here would be to learn the basics. And one of the things that I've always preached is you will win more by being consistent and keeping the ball in play than you will by hitting a lot of fancy dancy shots. So that was the first thing, is to master the basics. And then kind of a second thing that tied into this spin that I think a lot of times people weren't aware of, because we have a big influx of people coming in from tennis. And I think that's great because you already bring some backgrounds in, you know some of your way around the court. There's some things that translate well from tennis. There's some things that don't translate very well from tennis. And one of those things is spin. And there's actually a big reason why. And that big reason why is the way the ball compresses against a racket. So on a racket, you have string. A tennis ball compresses. And one of you said it really well when you were talking about this. CJ, you got a flat paddle and a hard plastic ball. So if you look at this picture, you can see that ball compressing against a tennis racket. It's easier to create spin than it is with the pickleball paddle and the hard plastic pickleball itself. And then the last thing that everybody really wanted everyone else to know about spin is you wanted people to know that you needed to vary your shots. Okay, great. If you can use a little spin, if you know how to do it, chances are if you come from tennis, you're familiar with some of the motions that create top spin, especially top spin. That's a pretty common one. But don't try and use spin on every shot. It doesn't matter if you're using top spin or just hitting the ball flat. If you're doing the same single thing, giving players the same look on every shot, eventually they're going to adjust to it and get used to it. So it becomes less of a weapon unless you use it a little bit sparingly, or mix it up, or mix it in. So that's essentially what people wanted you to know about spin. Is number one, master the basics first. In fact, it's kind of a funny thing. It happens all the time when I'm giving clinics and clinic topics. I'll have somebody who can't put the serve in consistently, and they say to me, I want to learn how to spin the serve. Well, how about we learn how to do the basic things first? Remember, you got a flat paddle and a hard ball. And then use it sparingly. Make sure that you vary it. And that doesn't go for just spinning shots. That goes for your serve. That goes for everything else. So pet peeve number 5 was excessive spin. All right. The next one. And I love this one, number 4, because my friend Mark Mazur says this one. He likes to say that there are 2 rules in pickleball. And I'm probably going to misquote him a little bit, but you're going to get the picture out of this. He likes to say there are 2 rules in pickleball. Rule number is hit the ball and get to the kitchen line. Rule number 2 is there are no other rules. Refer to rule number 1. And boy, I'll tell you, there was a lot of comments about not getting to the net. Now, there are a couple different strategies with coming to the net. There's a strategy that you have when you are receiving the serve, and there's a strategy that you have when you are returning the serve. I recently did 2 videos on both of those strategies, 2 separate videos. One is called Hit and Run, and the other one is called Stop Getting Beat, Get to the Net. I will put a link down in the show notes to both of those videos. So if you have questions on the strategy about how or when to move to the net, please make sure you get into the show notes and take a look at those 2 videos. But people wanted other pickleball players to know that this is not a baseline game. And that's something that is completely different in the transition from tennis. Tennis primarily has become a baseline game. I don't know if you watched any of the Australian Open. I love to watch tennis. I don't play anymore, but I still love to watch tennis. And if you watch the Australian Opens, particularly if you're watching the singles matches, they're hitting the ball from the baseline all the time. Even in doubles, there isn't the amount of net play that I think there used to be back in the days, back probably 20 or 30 years ago. I think it's coming back that way just a little bit, but there's still a lot of baseline. Still a lot of baseline game in there. And so one of the things that people wanted you to know is it's not as effective from the baseline as it is when you're playing up at the net. It just doesn't work that way. It's just different. You can't cut off the angles. The strategies are completely different. There's so many different things. So that's kind of the first thing they wanted you to know. The next thing was there was a lot of talk about why, and I'm a why person. I as a coach and a teacher, I want to understand if somebody's doing something incorrectly. I want to understand why they're doing it incorrectly, because many times that gives me clues as to how I can help them. So there were really kind of four things that came out or tend to come out when someone won't come to the net. Number one, they're afraid of the kitchen line. So think back to when you were a beginner. I don't know about you, but everybody was like, don't step in the kitchen. Okay, stay away from the kitchen. Got to be out of the kitchen. In fact, one of my more popular videos is don't come to the kitchen too fast. Now, it's not about coming to the kitchen. It's about when to come to the kitchen. But anyway, we get all this information about the kitchen. So when you're afraid of something, typically, we don't go running towards it. In fact, we kind of hang back just a little bit. So we tell beginners to be afraid of the kitchen. And in some cases, they're so afraid of the kitchen, they don't want to come up to the kitchen. Another reason that beginners, or not even beginners, because that was definitely one of the things that you made real clear in your emails, was beginners may not understand it, but there's a lot of good players who don't get to the line fast enough. A second one was the lob, being afraid of the lob. Now, okay, I get it. There's maybe a little bit of truth to being afraid of the lob. But first of all, most people aren't good lobbers. Very rarely do you see two people on the same team that are good lobbers. If you're playing outside, it's a much more difficult shot to hit. Inside, okay, a little bit of threat with the inside. But chances are, and I'm going to bet on this, you will get beat less by the lob than you will be having one player at the kitchen and one player back. You're going to lose more points from a baseline game than you would from getting beat by the lob. Number three would be getting hit. And in fact, I have to tell you, this happened years ago. A friend of ours, Diane, and Diane is in her early 80s. You could just see her. When she was at the kitchen, it was like this, right? I mean, every time a ball came towards her, she was scared to get hit. And so what we did was two things to help Diane. Number one, we helped her to learn how to be a better blocker. If you're a good blocker, your fear of getting hit tends to dissipate. As she became a good blocker, she would stand at the non-volley zone. We would hit very hard shots at her. In fact, my friend Laura Fenton-Cavanda happened to be in town, and Laura absolutely rifled some shots right at Diane, and Diane just stood there and was able to block the ball and block it very effectively. And the more confident she got in blocking, the less scared she was to come to the net. So that fear of getting hit dissipated. So if that's a fear, or if you sense that fear, teach that person how to block. And then kind of the fourth thing that tends to happen is speed. Some people are just not fast enough to get to the kitchen line and mentally make the decision, okay, I'm just not going to go. Because I can only get halfway there, and we talk a lot about no man's land. I don't like to call it no man's land. If you see my videos about that area, I call it the transition zone, because you have to go through to there to get to the kitchen. What you want to do, if you're not fast enough to get to the kitchen in one fell swoop, is to do a split step and to utilize the split step. So those are some of the strategies that can help you. I also have some videos on the blocking, how to block that hard hit shot, as well as how to utilize a split step. So if you or somebody you know are having difficulties with that, I would definitely go ahead and I would recommend I would recommend that. And those are really kind of like the 4 things. It's really not a baseline game, and then figuring out what the fear is and helping that person past the fear. So that's number 4. Let's see. I got a Mike. I think it's Mike. This is just about like vision wise. This is just about the right size for me to write it. How about singles? Mike, that's a great question. How about singles? The strategy for coming to the net in singles is not as clear cut. And with more and more players coming from tennis into the playing pickleball singles, you are starting to see some more baseline games. Now, I still believe, even in singles, and if you watch some high-end singles matches, you may see a little baseline game, but you still see players coming to the net because you have cut off the distance between you and the person at the baseline, and you are in control of the point. If you watched singles this year's nationals, you know, if you watched Ben Johns, and I'm kind of talking some of the younger people, you see this as well in some of the older age divisions as well. But Ben Johns comes to mind, as does Tyson McGuffin. You know, Tyson is such a great singles player. A couple of the gals, the ladies, the Waters tend to stay back just a little bit, where if you watch Arina Tereshchenko, she comes forward fairly aggressively. So does a Lucy Kovalova, although they all have, you know, they have great baseline games. It's just more strategic. No different than singles tennis. You need to pick your time to get to the net, the best time. You can't just kind of hit and run blindly. So I hope we got that question answered correctly. Let's see. I see that we have a rules question there. So if you hit a ball with so much spin and high into the air, comes down and bounces back over the net, okay, I got to pull this closer. I'm never going to be able to read it. So it says, if you hit a ball with so much spin, it hit high in the air and comes down and bounces back over the net, who has to hit it? Do you get who gets the point? Essentially, I think is what's being asked by Drew. So if you hit a ball with a lot of spin, and it bounces, you're hitting to me, Drew, and it bounces on my side of the net, and it's going to go back over to your side of the net. If I can touch that ball and I make a play on that ball, hit it back into your court, it's still live. Conceivably, I'm going to win the point at that point in time. Chances are pretty good. If I can't touch it, it is your point. So hopefully that answers the question. All righty. If you got more questions, keep them coming. Feel free to go ahead and put them down into the notes down below. But we're going to keep moving on. We're going to get to number 3. By the way, nobody has yet said what they think number 1 could be. Any idea what you think the number 1 pet peeve in pickleball is? I'm going to guess a lot of you think it's this one. I got to tell you, 1, 2, and 3 were pretty darn close to each other. But let's go with this one. This was a big one. This was advice, right? So, man, I got to tell you, and you know what? This channel actually first started because of advice. Bad advice. I was so frustrated with getting advice. My very first video, and I will link to it down below, my very first video was all about advice, because I would get advice and then you get something opposite and you never understood why. And oh my goodness, I have to tell you, I was just unbelievably confused by the advice that I had gotten. So I'm going to give you some tips on advice. So first of all, here is what I would ask you to do, is ask. Unsolicited advice is just that. It is unsolicited. It's no fair. It's no fun. There were so many comments from people saying, please don't tell me what to do. And certainly, please don't tell me what to do during a game. And that was another big one. Timing of the advice was huge. There were a lot of people who might have been open to advice, but when somebody stops a game and starts teaching on the court, it's not much fun for the other three people who are out there. And boy, I'll tell you, that came through loud and clear. I always have, I'm a golf professional, I'm a ski professional, a pickleball professional, and before I would say anything to anyone at any point in time, because I've made that mistake. I have offered unsolicited advice in all of those sports, and usually when that happens, I get that RCA dog look. Somebody stares at me like, I didn't ask you for anything, CJ, come on. What are you doing here? I have done it. I can see the look in people's eyes when I actually do it, and I just don't. Just don't do it. That's my advice to you. Now, the other thing is this, is some people were really open to advice. There were some people who said they don't mind the advice, but the problem that they get is they never got the why. And I agree with that, because people will do what you ask them to do better if you tell them why it is that they should be doing it. I would also trust you this, or tell you this. I would never trust anyone's advice if they couldn't tell me why I specifically needed to do something on the pickleball court. If somebody just says, you need to do X, and I ask them why, and they can't tell me why, to me, they don't have a lot of credibility. You need to understand why it is that you are trying to do something. So that was the big thing. That was the advice part. Be careful with the advice part. Let's see. I'm going to bring this back over here. Sometimes my switcher just doesn't always work here. All right, let's see. I need to go backwards. Anyway, I am going to start looking. Let me see. Give me a second. I am going to get this right. And I want to see what your comments are. So sometimes I just mess this whole thing up. So advice. Ask people. Make sure you tell them why, and do it between games. Let's see, a couple questions. So Margaret says, if your partner doesn't come up to the net, this is going back to the one we talked about before, do I stay back with them? Margaret, that's a tough one. I always tell people it depends. What are you trying to do? If it is rec play and you're just out there to have some fun, sure. You may say to them in between games, you may say to them, I noticed that you're a really good player, but I don't always see you coming to the net. Is there some reason why? And then this goes back to generally those 4 reasons, and maybe you can do a little bit of coaching with them. I tend to not stay back. If I'm just playing rec play, I'm going to play the way that I would always play. I'm going to move about the court the way I would with a partner that I'm playing tournament play with. I don't want to fall into bad habits. So that's the reason that I do that. Now, I would just tell you, in rec play, I'm also not going to, if they're staying back, I'm not going to run back and try and get balls and win all these points. When I play rec play, I'm there to have fun. I'm there to enjoy the day. I'm not being hyper competitive. I am just there to enjoy the day. So I guess the answer is it depends on what your goals and objectives are for that particular day, whether you go back or stay forward. Let's see. CJ, do you find indoor or outdoors the most difficult surface to play on? Interesting. I like them both because I do play indoors or outdoors. There are some gyms that are difficult to play in because of the lighting. Our gym is particularly difficult to play in because of the floor. The floor is real slippery. Last week I did a video on court shoes and how to get the most out of indoor court shoes. Extremely important if you're inside. The lob is, I think, much more effective inside versus outside. I love being out in the sunshine, right? I love being outside, but sometimes it's just not always conducive. I'm in Lake Tahoe, not conducive to being outside. So I guess in short answer to your question, I enjoy them both. The one thing that I struggle with inside is sometimes the lighting is bad, and sometimes it's very difficult to see the lines on the court. But there are other places, I play some other places that it's easy to see the lines and the lighting is really good. So I guess it depends on the venue, but I enjoy them both. Let's see. Ooh, maybe grumpy people? No, but that's one. Ooh, being argumentative. You are definitely getting close on that one, Diane. Let's see. I'm just trying. Oh, line calls. You think that one might be coming up, Donna? Dan says, hi, I appreciate the advice I've received from the more experienced players. And you know what? I think that's great, Dan. I would also ask you, I'd encourage you, though, as you receive advice, is always to make sure you say why. Just because somebody has a little bit more experience than you do, doesn't mean that the advice that they're giving to you is what you should apply to your pickleball game. My thing, and I will tell you, I just told you it started because of bad advice. And the advice was that you always run to the net on your third shot, no matter what. Well, yeah, only if you want to get killed, because you don't know if your partner is, especially when you're new, did they hit a ball that's attackable? Are they hitting a drive? Are they trying to hit a drop shot? You have to strategically time your advancement to the net based on what you see your partner doing with that third shot. And I think it's still out there. There's just a bunch of people who say you run to the net no matter what. That's just not true. Let's see. Drew says, I'm a new player and my pet peeve is people who serve just over the net and it lands inside but too low to get it from the baseline and return. Yeah, that's a tough one. And one little recommendation for you there, I thought it was Drew, I'm sorry, Dan. One little new one there, Dan, is watch the motion of their arm. Watch the paddle. Many times that can tell you how much speed is on the serve. And as you start to do that, you might not recognize it right away, but you may start to pick up on a serve that's coming slow. You might also want to check your position on the baseline. Perhaps you're standing a little too far behind the baseline, especially if somebody has a tendency to serve slowly. And then let's see, CJ, I thought lousy scorekeeping by a player could be a pet peeve. Ooh, you guys are getting in close. So let's go on. We got two more left, right? So it is not the it is the always slamming. Okay, I mean that is one that you talked a lot about, and it wasn't hard shots. You aren't talking about hard shots. That you made that very, very clear. You're talking about having no other strategy other than hitting hard. What you really wanted people to know is that placement versus power is more important. And I agree with you 110%. Where you put that ball strategically, when you see a person out of place, you can hit it hard to them. But if they're in a good position and they are a great defender, chances are it's coming back. But if you can place that ball and you don't have to do it hard, maybe you place it in an angle. And Dan was just talking about a difficult serve for him, right? When a soft serve just over the service line comes in, that's a tough one. The other thing that a lot of people talked about is slamming when somebody comes to pickleball and they're maybe come from another racket sport, perhaps tennis, racquetball, maybe even ping pong, that in the lower levels, slamming the ball and hitting hard is generally pretty effective because people haven't yet developed their blocking skills. But the minute you get to like a 3-5 level, that really is not an effective strategy anymore. it is, those people now can block, or most of those people are starting to block, right somewhere inside of that level. So while you can get away with it at the lower levels, once you get to the 3-5, it definitely changes. And if you get to that level and all you're doing is slamming, now you have to learn the soft game. And chances are you're going to get buried for a while you're trying to learn the soft game. So people talked a lot about, dinking, doing longer rallies. People really want longer rallies. It wasn't about winning every point, which was one of the peeves 6 through 10. It wasn't about winning every point. It wasn't about anything other than let's play more, let's have more fun. I think we can all agree a long rally is really fun. And then the kind of the little bit of the sarcastic comment is, we go to the line, we warm up with all these dinks, and then nobody ever dinks the darn ball again, right? Can you relate? Yeah, right? Can you relate? Yeah, how many times has that happened? I think it happens quite often. So they're talking about longer rallies, using the dinks. You know how to do it. If you're warming up with the dink, give it a try, right? And wait sometimes for those higher percentage shots. If you're waiting for those higher percentage shots, chances are you're going to get that longer rally. So it wasn't just about the slamming part. That's okay. People are like, fine. There are going to be some hard hit shots coming your way. The only time people took exception to it is if you were just killing a beginner, right? You got somebody out on the court who is just specifically below, and not even a beginner, somebody who's really below your level, who's maybe popping the ball up a little bit, and you're just beating them mercilessly with the hard hit shot. People were like, just stop that. There's just absolutely no reason to do that. I will never forget, I was playing, a friend of mine who's a real good player. He is in his late 70s. And he and I played a lot together. And at the end of a day where we were out, he had his wife play with him, and I was playing with somebody else. And his wife is not anywhere near as aggressive a player as he is, not anywhere near as physical fit. And somebody popped a ball up, and I went up to slam it. And she was right across the net from me, and I could see her like covering up out of the corner of my eyes. And I backed off my shot. I think I even actually missed the shot because I felt so bad that I did that, right? Just stupidity. So don't do it. All right, before we get to number one, I'm going to take a look over here. Thank you, my indoor trouble. Also adjusting to the lighting outdoor is the sun. Yeah. And I did have one thing on lighting, and this is I did a show on indoor back in December. Try different ball colors. That may help. In fact, we have 3 courts at our gym, and they all have something slightly different behind the courts. So on one set of courts, we tend to play with one color ball, and on another set of courts, we play with a different color ball because we can see it. Bangers and no dinks are my trouble. More rallies. All right. Yeah, you know what? Rallies are fun. I mean, I remember watching, in fact, there's a clip on the Pickleball channel. It was from the Las Vegas Open 2 years ago, not 2019. I think it was 2018, but Google it. It was a long rally. It was Tyler Loon, and I can't remember who else, but I remember him being in it. And I think it was 67 shots. Like, wouldn't that have been fun to do? I mean, incredibly fun to do, right? So I'd like to do that. Let's see. Love pickleball and all of your advice to us seniors. Thank you so much, Lewis. All right. Let's get into number one. Some of you guys already got this one, right? Yeah, you know you did. It is, without a doubt, line calling. Cue the confetti, right? If you said line calling, this is it. And I was going to make this really short and really brief, but I figured I'm going to use this opportunity to go through some line calling basics and really to help people become better at line calling. And so everybody's a little different, but let's start talking about, I want to talk about some basics here, okay? So line calling basics. Here, these are the first 3 rules. And rule number 6 is where we talk about line calls inside of the rule book. This is 6A, B, and C. Essentially what it says is this, is on shots, with the exception of the serve, if a ball lands in the court or touches any of the court line, that ball is considered in. So for people who are new, if the serve hits the non-volley zone line, it's considered a fault. Okay, it cannot touch the non-volley zone line, but it can touch any of the other lines. Now, there's some debate about what is a line. So let me, when does it touch the line? So let me go ahead and let me try and break this down for you just a little bit. So when we look at tennis, the ball compresses. I showed you that picture in the beginning about spin. And here you can see the guy's hand flattening the ball compresses. So if you're coming from tennis, when the ball compresses across the line, right, it spreads out a little bit. So it actually touches the line. And then it's considered in. And again, Australian Open was just on. If you saw any of the Hawkeye calls, right, sometimes there's like this little tiny itsy titsy beast that you could not almost possibly see touching the line, and that ball is considered in. That's not the same way it is in pickleball. In pickleball, the ball would be overhanging the line because it doesn't compress. Here's something that I always tell people to do is to take a pickleball, to stand by the line and place it so it looks like the ball is overhanging the line, but then rub the ball onto the court. Now, I'm not sure if this will work indoors, but it works outdoors, right? Because outdoors the surface will scuff the ball. And when you actually pull the ball away and look at the scuff mark, you can see that ball was actually out because it was off. That ball is just actually out. Even though it's overhanging, the ball is actually out. So let me try to give you a little visual here with this next one. Let me take this away. There we go. So here are just some line calling basics. The three, we can see, moving left to right on these green balls, right? On the green ball, the first green ball, that is definitely in. On the next green ball, it is, if you looked right under the center of that, that is in, and it is touching the line. And then the third one is about halfway through the line, right? It is definitely touching the line. The pink ball, that ball is actually out. Again, if you were to scrape that, that ball is touching the out. Even though it looks like it's overhanging the line, it's actually out. Okay, so hopefully this is starting to make a little bit of sense to you just in terms of the line calling basics. Okay, all right, so that's number one. That's how you call the lines, right? And here's the deal. I think everybody tries to call the lines to the best of their ability. I try and give people the benefit of the doubt, because that's in the rules. So that's the next part that I want to cover in here is, so we move into this. Number 6, players are responsible for calling the lines on their side of the court. So I get to call the lines on my side of the court. You get to call the lines on your side of the court. Let's face it. You really can't see if I'm calling the baseline. I'm closer to the baseline than you are on the other side of the court. If you're at your baseline, you're 40 feet away. You probably can't see it as well as I can to begin with. But the rule says I get to call on my side, you get to call on your side. The next rule is 63. The opponent gets the benefit of the doubt on all line calls made. Pickleball is supposed to be, now, and I'm specifically here, I guess I should have prefaced this at the beginning, I'm really talking rec play, right? In tournament play, it may be a little different because sometimes you have lines people, sometimes you have referees. Referees are responsible for doing different things, not necessarily calling lines, but calls can be appealed to a referee. I'm really focusing here on rec play. And in rec play, for most of us, it's just plain fun, right? That's why we're out there and we're doing it. So your opponent gets the benefit of the doubt on the line calls. That means if you're not sure, it's in. If you can't say definitively, hey, that ball was out, Dan, that ball is in, okay? Now, here's another one. You get this all the time. Well, I didn't see it. Let's play it over. No. That's not what the rule book says. If you didn't see it, let's just say one went past you and there's a good chance that it landed in and you didn't see it, You don't get to replay it. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt. That ball is in. If it was not seen, or if there's a little bit of uncertainty, that ball is in. Okay? All right. I'm going to move on to the next one. This is parallax. If you've ever heard that term, and they actually use the word parallax in this is 67. And essentially means if I'm looking over a line, right? It's hard to see it. Unless I can definitively tell that there's a space between the ball and the line, I shouldn't call that out. So sometimes that would be if I'm on one side of the court, let's say I'm on the even side of the court, I'm looking over towards the odd side of the court, I can't see that ball as well as my partner can. That really should be my partner's call, because I'm looking over a couple of sets of line. It changes my depth of judgment. It's harder to be accurate in that case. So I would defer that kind of call to my partner unless I was really certain that I saw that out. All right, next one. Ooh, this happens a lot. Can you ask the people on the other side of the net for their opinion? Well, you certainly can. And sometimes, right, it's rec play. So if my partner is on the odd side of the court, I can't see it. Again, we're just referring to the last ball. I really didn't see it. They didn't have a chance to see it. They could say to the person who's on the other side of the net, who has a better downline view, right? The two of them are on that side of the court. They have that better downline view. They could ask them, did you happen to see that shot? Now, if you did, you got to accept what they say. Okay, so don't ask if you don't want to know. All the same things fall in line if there's doubt, right? The whole bit. You can read this rule here. It's Rule 66 inside of the rule book. If you don't have a rule book, I will put a link, a PDF link. In fact, there's a brand new 2020 rule book that the US APA just put out at the start of this year. So if you don't have a copy, you should get a copy and download it. I will put a link in the show notes down below. And you can read this. 6D6 is this rule. But you know what? If you ask your opponents, you have to take what they tell you because you asked. All right. Let's see. More to finish this up. Other kind of line calling rules, some of the things you need to know about line calling. And if you're unsure about line calling, I recommend that you go into Section 6 in the rule book. Go in there and take a good look at it. But do it instantly, right? Nobody wants to wait and hear a line call a minute later or 30 seconds later. It is acceptable to use your hand or your voice. Sometimes, especially outdoors, it's maybe a little bit easier. Indoors, it can be really hard to hear. So indoor, I'll use a finger to indicate that the ball is out a lot. It's just can be very, very difficult to hear in the gym. And another one I want to touch on is if there's a conflict between partners. If I call it in, or my partner called it out and I call it in, it's in, right? It goes back to you give the benefit of the doubt to the other side. So the big benefit of the doubt goes to them. So conflict between partners, it goes to them. And then I think the very last thing people really wanted you to know is stop arguing about line calls. I really are there some people who cheat? Absolutely. There's people who cheat in every sport, right? There are people who cheat in every sport. There are people who are going to cheat in pickleball. There will be people who just call poor lines. Okay, you know what? I just choose not to play with those people. I just really don't like to play with them. But arguing line calls is no fun. People don't like it. There's really no sense to it. It causes a lot of hard feelings. I will tell you, I was at a tournament a couple of years ago and we were playing, and on the court next to us, a fight almost broke out. There were two guys who literally were nose to nose arguing about a line call. And I mean, I was scared. We actually stopped playing. They had to bring over a referee. specifically for that match, so that match could finish. And you know, later the gal, it was mixed at that particular tournament. The gal who was partners with the man who kind of started this whole argument, I saw her sitting off to the side. Her stuff was near mine, and she was sitting in a chair, and she was all alone, and she was like really hunched over, and I could just tell she was super sad. And I said to her, I just asked, I said, "Are you okay?" And she looked at me, she said, "I can't believe this." She said, "I've played with him 2 times, and this is the 2nd time he's done this." And she said, "I'm just not going to play with him again." So that's a big one. Stop arguing about the line calls. I mean, this is supposed to be a super, super duper fun game, right? So remember, look at the rules. The ball doesn't compress. Do not call the ball from the other side. And stop arguing about the line calls. Again, it's supposed to be a fun game. So as I answer some of your questions, I'm going to go back. I'm going to show you what all of the top 10 pickleball peeves are. And if we could kind of maybe spread the word, I think we'll make the game a whole lot more fun and make 2020 more fun. So let's see. CJ, I thought lousy scorekeeping by player could be a pet peeve. Actually, lousy scorekeeping was in there. It definitely was. It was more not paying attention to the score, as well as not calling the score loudly. And I think that's one of those things that can happen inside. Some people are kind of soft-spoken, and it's already difficult to hear inside of most gym. You know, that sound just reverberates. So yes, that was one. Let's see, bangers and no dinks are my troubles. Loved pickleball. Who calls it? Who calls the, I'm going to say, who calls the line? I think we went through that, right? If you have more questions, Dave, please let me know. But there you have it. Those are our top 10 pickleball pet peeves. So if you missed it, there's a link also down below that'll take you back to numbers 6 through 10. It was trying to win every point. Pickleball is not tennis, not playing with beginners. We hate illegal serves. We do not like it when we get to the court and somebody doesn't give us enough time to warm up. Hey, come on, you're in. We talked about excessive spin instead of the basics, getting to the net, the advice, slamming balls, and line calls. So I just want to remind you, thank you so much for all of the things that you shared. Our next live is going to be March 3rd at 4 p.m. Pacific time. I have a lot of things in those videos, so I have a lot of ideas, but I really want to get to some of the things that you'd like to discuss too. And I know you've taken time out of your busy day to come here and to spend it with me or to watch this in a replay. So if you have some things that you'd specifically like to see me, topics you'd like to see me discuss either in a video on the channel or on a live show, I put my email address down there. It's cj@betterpickleball.com. Please go ahead and drop me an email or leave me a comment in the show notes. I don't see any further questions, and everybody's got stuff to do, right? Maybe there's some pickleball in your future tonight. I hope there is. So I'm going to end this same way I always do. I appreciate you being here, because you know what? Together we can train smart, live bold, and age well. Have a wonderful night, everybody.